Absolutely. Okay. Hey, thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay. So the next one is on the product backlog refinement. So my statement is the most important Scrum event is product backlog refinement. What is your thought on that?
That's another tricky question, I must say. And if you are, my advice to people out there who are still interviewing is don't rush to give a response. It's okay to breathe in and take 3 seconds before you respond to your interviewer. Now, on a typical day, if you were in a haste, you would just jump in and start saying, okay, this is my own favorite ceremony. The question was talking about a refinement, backlog refinement session. In the Scrum guide, backlog refinement session is not a recognized Scrum ceremony. So it is very important for you to clarify that with your interviewer to say, thank you, gentlemen, for that question. Even though I know the Scrum ceremonies and I perhaps might have a favorite, but I need to make it clear to everyone here that the backlog refinement session, according to the Scrum guide, is not a recognized ceremony. But of course, you cannot understate the importance of having a refinement session. Having said that, you also let them know, make that disclosure to let them know that all Scrum ceremonies are very important. None is more important than the other. But under this interview situation, if you were asked to pick just one, assuming you were in an exam hall and you were asked to pick just one, they acknowledge, they have accepted that all of the Scrum ceremonies are important. None is more important than the other. Then at that point, you can go ahead and say, for me, typically it would be the retrospective session. And I'll go ahead to buttress that. Okay, if I say the sprint retrospective session is my own favorite if I were to choose out of all of the important Scrum ceremonies. And of course, it helps us to practically apply the 3 pillars of Agile and Scrum. And what are those 3 pillars? Transparency, inspection, and adaptability. You have been on the sprint, 2 week sprint session. You have delivered shippable goods. And as a team, you come together to reflect on what you have been able to accomplish. Then it's an opportunity for you to inspect what exactly you did, have the team engage in conversation, very transparent conversations to gather insights. And those feedbacks, you now prioritize them and see which, of course, some retrospective sessions you might have about over 100 feedbacks. If you say you want to take those 100 feedbacks into your next sprint session, you might not be able to actually put all of them into practice. That is the importance of prioritizing those feedbacks. You have been able to inspect what you have delivered. In the course of the conversation, team members that are having conversations, giving you their feedbacks, that's a transparent approach within the team. Now, those feedbacks, you have them as a catalog somewhere, you prioritize them. You can say, okay, you can agree with the team and say the top 3 for now, these are the ones who will try to apply to our subsequent sprints. So that is the importance. And that's why I think for me, if I were to choose in an exam and say, okay, we know that all the Scrum ceremonies are important, but in this exam, we want you to choose one that you think you like the most. I will choose the sprint retrospective session just because it enables me to apply those pillars of Agile Scrum: transparency, inspection, and adaptability. Just ensuring that we continue to improve on ourselves. That's just what I have to say about that.
Would you like to explain a little bit more on a product backlog refinement part?
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to do that. And my apologies again. I like to have this conversation just for the benefit of those who are new to the industry. I should
Yeah.
have defined that as well. So the product backlog refinement session, it's so I'm going to use an example of a large organization. Let's say the organization has 5 Scrum teams working on the same project or even sometimes different projects. So it means you have a repository where you have all of those requirements and all of that. So that repository, we can call it the enterprise backlog, just like a container where you're putting all of those customer requirements. That's a backlog. Now, the product owner sits down based on the business value assigned by the business team. The product owner sits down to prioritize all of the items in that backlog. Before I miss this point, it is important to let you know that when you have too many items in your backlog, it might be difficult to manage. At most, it should not be more than 150 story point, 150 issues in the backlog. And if you are in a team whereby the team has matured and they probably have an average deliverable of, let's say, 60, usually 3 times of their commitment per sprint is sufficient enough to have in your backlog. So if a team is consistently delivering 60, it's just reasonable to keep it at 60 by 3, that's 180, but that would have exceeded that 150. Let's say it's 40, 40 times 3, that's 120. So that repository where you keep all of your client requirements, we want this in our software, we want this to be done, we want all of that to be done, you put them in an archive. So that is called the backlog. The product owner goes there, prioritize them based on the business value assigned by the business team. Now, we have been able to prioritize them. We cannot deliver, let's say we have 150 requirements in a backlog and we run a 2-week sprint. We obviously cannot deliver, we cannot execute all of those 150 requirements in one sprint session. So it means based on the priority value we have assigned to those stories in the backlog, let's say we are picking 5. So the product owner says, for this next sprint, we'll be working towards delivering these 5 requirements. And those 5 requirements, you need to have the entire team come to a meeting that we'll call the product backlog refinement session. At this session, what do you discuss? What do you intend to achieve? You begin to look at each of those requirements. You have picked out 5 now, those 5 requirements. You begin to assess them critically one after the other. The Scrum Master shares the screen depending on whether you're working remotely or you're working in the office. This is a particular issue, the issue number, you raise it, then the team begins to discuss on that particular requirement. They try to break it down, look at the user story, and a critical thing you want to achieve there is to ensure that each of those stories has a clearly defined acceptance criteria, which is very important because that acceptance criteria say it technically means that before I can accept that you have completed these stuff, this and that are the functionality or the performance that I expect to see in what you are working on for me. Then another thing you want to do at that level as well, I've seen, see, of course, that's not the best situation, but at that refinement session, when you have broken down those epics, those stories to executable levels, now maybe to tasks, to what have you. So essentially, of all the, let's say 150 requirements in the backlog, your team takes 5 and says, this is our focus for the next sprint. You discuss those stories in details, you break them down, you ensure that they have acceptance criteria, the stories are clear, everybody has an understanding, they are well defined, acceptance criteria is there, the estimation is completed, then you can now move them to another column in your backlog where you call them ready for sprint, such that when you are now doing your sprint planning session, you can now move them to your sprint, whatever number you give your sprint, and you get it started. So that's me trying to give a detailed explanation of what a product backlog refinement session entails. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Akin.
You're welcome.
Okay, so next one is with respect to estimation. So this is the statement. The
Yeah.
main objective of planning poker is to achieve undisputed decision from the team. What is your thought on this, Akin?
Wow. I think that question is one of those tricky ones I've encountered as well. Now, estimation itself is an opportunity for the team to share their opinion, to show how well they understand that particular requirements. If you work in an organization, for example, let's say they use pointing poker now that most people work remotely, you use pointing poker, it's time for you to estimate stories, then everybody cast their votes. When they cast the votes, it will still be hidden. Then you as a Scrum Master will click on show votes, then you see what story points that each of the team members have given that particular story. In a situation where you show the votes, let's say You have 5 team members. Let's say 4 of them or 3 of them says it should be 5 points. One person says it should be 3 points. One person says it should be 8 points. But immediately you show the votes, those who says 3 and 8, because they feel that majority says it should be 5, they quickly change their vote from 3 and 8, they change it to 5 just to be in alignment with other persons without discussing why. That's an habit, or that's a practice you should watch out for on your team. The idea behind estimation, quote and unquote, is not to arrive at a unanimous um, story pointing or decision, but rather to gain a consensus of the team. You are trying to have a consensus here. You expect that because they have not done the story, of course, they have been working together, they know how they estimate their effort and the time required, but you expect that there might be deviations. People will have different understanding on how to execute that task. So it's a way of promoting conversation at the level of refinement session when you are doing this estimation. If those guys just go ahead and change those story points, their votes to align with what majority says, it means they are not happy engaging in conversation at that level. And those are one of the attributes or the characters that you should watch out for your team. You need to promote that environment such that people are happy to discuss why they think it should be this. Open communication. So if you are seeing your team members rushing to align with what majority is doing, you need to step in there and let them educate them, let them understand that, hey guys, don't feel crucified, don't feel ashamed. The essence of this estimation period is for us to gain a consensus. We understand there will be differences in our views, but just in case you have estimated as 3, we want to hear your opinion. Why do you think it should be 3 story points? Those who voted as 5, why do you think it should be 5? And for you who says 8, why do you think it should be 8? Eventually, when you have those conversations, it has happened. Um, when you have those conversations, those who even voted 8 and 5, they might see reason why they should actually step it down to 3, right? And if you have not created that enabling environment for them to have that kind of conversation, they would have overestimated that story. It means that during sprint session, during the sprint itself, they quickly get that job done and they still have enough capacity, and they probably just waste that time. So the idea behind that is not to achieve a unanimous decision, but to gain consensus. And how do you gain consensus? When conversations take place for people to hear their view, their perspectives about how they think this story should be executed. That's the way I think that should be well addressed.
Absolutely. Thanks, Akin, for that.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
The next one is also an interesting one. So the statement is, the agile project fails the most because of lack of planning. Uh, do you agree with this thought?
I absolutely more than 100% disagree with that thought, really. Whether you operate in the waterfall environment or in the agile environment or even hybrid environment, um, there's the necessary and the required amount of planning is expected to have gone into that. So whether it is particularly in this situation, they say agile projects fail the most because they don't plan. No, agile is just telling you that don't stay there until your entire life. Hey, Sunan, are we together?
Again, I'm a little bit
I think
disturbance.
the screen was frozen.
Yeah, yeah, same for
Are we
me.
good now?
Yeah, yeah, we are good
Yeah.
now.
Sorry about that, but I think we cannot influence that. It's just
That's
quite
perfectly okay.
unfortunate.
It's one of the
Yeah.
yeah, consequences of having the Zoom session. Yeah. So I think you can start from beginning. That's perfectly okay. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people say, oh, most agile projects fail because they don't plan. No. Agile is not abolishing planning. Agile is trying to tell you that rather than spend your entire life or the entire um, duration of the project in the office doing what's have you, do the basic planning that you need to deliver the first phase of the project. So at every point in time, at every phase of that project, there's a substantial amount of planning that goes into it. For in my experience, in the agile industry, there's at the project level, at the top management level, there's a level of planning there. At the release level, there's a certain level of planning there, even up onto the iteration level. So if anyone says, oh, most agile projects fail because of lack of planning, I think it is absolutely untrue. The person needs to understand well, maybe lay hands on some of those helpful resources on agile to understand what exactly it entails. Agile is just saying, do the basic required of you. Don't sugarcoat things. If you need to just do a 2 hours planning, do a rough sketch and get on the field, if that is what you need to execute that particular phase of that project, do just that and go to the field. Don't start painting with watercolor. It should be brown. Just the basic minimum planning and get on the field. It's a rolling wave plan. As events unfold, as you progress through the project, before that first phase is completed, the planning for the next already started behind the scene such that there is no lag, there is no pause in between the project, and the project continues to go on seamlessly. So agile projects, they have the sufficient amount of planning required at the project level, at the release level, at the iteration level. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Okay. Listen to this one. This one is again very interesting. So my team has 4 different projects, each with varying degree of risk, and they all must run concurrently. So to avoid any stress, I opted for plan-driven approach for all 4 projects. So what are your thoughts on this?
Now, I will try to break down that question as best as I can. Now, this is an organization, or let's say a gentleman, that has been saddled with the responsibility of delivering 4 different projects. And he's been so unlucky that those 4 projects must run concurrently, they must be going on at the same time. Now, he wanted to save himself some stories, some explanations, and he just chose the plan driven approach to execute all of those 4 projects, bearing in mind that the projects have different degrees of risk inherent in them. Before I answer the question further, I think it's important to also, for the sake of new people who are trying to understand this industry, plan driven approach is similar to what you call the waterfall approach. So in a situation whereby you do all of your planning, you have an idea of, for example, you want to build a house, 2 bedroom apartments, and you sit down in the office, you do the planning, you do the 3D imaging, you do everything such that you can begin to feel the house on paper before you get on the field. That's what they call plan driven approach. The other one we have been speaking about is the agile approach, whereby you do a level of planning just sufficient for you to get started, and as the project progresses in a rolling wave approach, you do the necessary planning for each of the subsequent phases. Now, going back to this question, 4 projects, their risk level are not the same. They are not in the same risk matrix. But this man felt like, wow, because I've been told to deliver those projects must be running simultaneously. Let me just choose one methodology and get it done. I'm not a prophet of doom, but I can guarantee the gentleman that if not all, a few of those projects will fail. And why do I feel so? Now, we need to understand that whether you operate in the hybrid environment where you're trying to combine both the agile and the plan-driven methodology, or whether you work in just the waterfall environment or the agile environment, the basic thing we need to understand here, any methodology you are using, you have to tailor that methodology to ensure the success of your project. There is no one silver bullet fits it all. No, you look at the the factors, the type of project you are involved in. What are those factors? What phases are there? Then you look at which of these methodologies can best help me deliver success. It is very possible that just one methodology, let's say agile approach alone, might not give you success. You might have to consider combining agile and waterfall. So now there's a key point in that particular question: different risk criteria. Now, how do you determine whether I should use the waterfall approach, whether I should go with the agile methodology, or whether I should use hybrid, the combination of agile and waterfall? There are three major factors that are very important to enable you decide properly on which of the methodologies you should use for any project at any point in time. One of them, which has been mentioned in that question, is the level of uncertainty around that particular project. This gentleman has 4 projects to execute. Each of them has different risk category. So level of uncertainty is the same thing as the risk level. Another factor for you to determine which methodology would help you achieve success, 3 factors are very critical. You want to look at the level of uncertainty, the risk associated with each of those projects. The second factor you want to look at is the resources that will be working on that project, the team. What is their level of proficiency? What experience have they? The other third factor is the stakeholder involvement. We have some projects that the stakeholders, the critical stakeholders here, they want to get involved at every phase of the project. So a good balancing of these 3 factors will help you to determine which of the methodology will be best suited to deliver success for you on your projects. But in this question, the only factor they pointed out is risk. So I will tell you, they are keeping other factors, the team proficiency, the stakeholder involvement, they are keeping those factors constant. So if it was just about risk alone, when the project is of very low risk, of course, at that level, it is best for you to go with the plan-driven approach, the waterfall approach. If the risk is high, it is best for you to use the agile approach. If it is in between the high and the low, that's the medium level, it is not bad for you to make a combination and get the hybrid agile approach. So a part of it done with the plan driven, with the waterfall method, a part of the project is done using the agile method. So that's the perfect way to address that, instead of the gentleman going ahead to just choose one methodology on top of his head and he just goes to execute those 4 projects. Yeah, that's what I think. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so next one is again a kind of scenario based. So now let's assume that your company works in a scaled agile framework with several Scrum teams, and you often work as a Scrum master. You also participating in Scrum of Scrum sessions, but then you observe that those meetings or the events is only attended by the Scrum masters, not by any other team members. So do you think that these sessions are effective and then they make sense, or um, what kind of feedback you want to give on this kind of sessions? Okay.
Yeah, so this particular question, I had a reflection on it, and the question is basically asking you, who are those to attend Scrum of Scrums? And to answer that question, it is not only the Scrum Masters. Now, let me explain to you what a scaled agile framework is. Like I said earlier on in this session, scaled agile means that a smaller company, now we have a bigger company that wants to leverage Scrum. Let's say Scrum now, and they have, let's say, 8 Scrum teams. They want to ensure the projects are going on smoothly. So it means that a high level of coordination is required amongst those 8 teams to ensure there's synergy and to ensure that we don't derail from achieving our goals. So at this level, each of the Scrum team, of course, they're expected to hold a very important ceremony. That's their daily scrum, their daily stand-up at the level of their respective teams. After that daily stand-up, there should be what is called Scrum of Scrums, where each representative Scrum Master of each Scrum team comes together to meet with critical stakeholders in the organization. Please underline that word, critical stakeholders in the organization. They should be so critical that they can move resources. They are the people who have the power to be able to move resources around. There's no point having that elaborate meeting across teams where you raise concerns and there's nobody there who can readily resolve those issues for you. So to answer that question, when you have a Scrum of Scrum session, it should not be attended by the Scrum Masters alone. You must have critical stakeholders in the organization. For example, the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer of the organization, such that the person asks you, okay, in your team, some of those questions, some of those things you discuss in that Scrum of Scrums, they are, the CTO will probably ask you, okay, between the last time we had our session and now, what has your team accomplished? And between that time and now, do you have any impediments blocking you from making progress on your team? Or it could be asked the other way around. Even if there's no impediment obstructing your progress, do you think you'll be putting any impediment on the ways of other teams? So those are the kind of conversations that happens there. Now, if at the level of that session, you have an impediment, the CTO, being an influential stakeholder in the organization, is able to leverage his office to get those issues resolved for you right on the spot without having to book another session. So as well, if you are putting another impediment on the way of other teams, at that level, other Scrum Masters for those teams are able to understand that impediments. At that level of discussion, you discuss on how best to mitigate that. And if you need any support from the management, the CTO, and other critical stakeholders who are right there in the session can resolve that immediately for you. So a Scrum of Scrum sessions, of course, all Scrum Masters for all the Scrum teams must attend, but key critical stakeholders of the organizations who have the capacity, who have the authorization to move resources around needs to be present at that level to make that session an effective one. Thank you.
Hey, thanks again for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is, I think you already touched based on that with respect to hybrid agile approach. So can you just give a high level description of what is hybrid agile approach and the different characteristics of a hybrid approach? Okay.
Yeah. Like I tried to describe in the previous question you asked me. Now, in the industry, you have the waterfall approach. That's a plan driven whereby you spend substantial amount of the project duration in the office trying to plan everything, try to know the end of the project right in the office before you get on the field. The other one is the agile approach, where you do it iteratively. You break it down into small chunks and deliver in little bits valuable and shippable products. Now, hybrid agile environments, you are trying to fuse these two approaches, these methodologies into one to help you achieve. You are trying to do what is called tailoring. You are trying to tailor those two methodologies, the waterfall approach, the agile approach, trying to tailor them such that it is not 100% agile and neither is it 100% waterfall. It is in between to deliver success on your project. Now, the key characteristics here, from my experience, I'll be speaking out to you based on my experience in my organizations. So you could have a situation whereby there's a front end, like front end planning, like inception planning before the real commencement of the development work. So there's a planning, though very brief, but it looks more like the waterfall approach where all the critical stakeholders, the what have you, the project charter, all of those business case and all of that comes to play. You have all those discussions. Now, the next phase will be the getting the job done itself, the development team, they are probably using Scrum to deliver on those tasks. That's the agile method. But while those guys are working to deliver using maybe Scrum methodology, there's another team you can put them in the project management, in the PMO, project management office. The team can be called, they do what they call ongoing project management for you. The developers, they are using the Scrum methodology, which is an agile methodology to deliver the exact task to be done. But within the project management team, there's an ongoing project management to ensure that the delivery team is right on track, and we are right on track to deliver on the deadlines we signed up with our clients. Then when the delivery team, the Scrum teams, when they are done delivering their value, you could also have another back-end team that manages the entire deployment of what has been produced by the Scrum teams. So on the left hand, you have what's called front-end inception planning. The next one, the middle of at the right hand, on the left, you have the inception planning. On your right hand, you have the back-end planning. In between those two, you have the delivery team that is using agile methodology, let's say Scrum. And on top of that delivery team, on top of that Scrum, there's what they call ongoing project management. At the end of the day, you are not able to say, oh, this is 100% agile, and neither are you able to say 100% waterfall. It's a mixture of both methodologies to ensure that the project is successful. That's the simplest way I think I can explain hybrid agile management to you. Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful, Kane. And I think you've given a wonderful, great explanation of all those questions. So, friends, this is all for this particular session, but then we have more session coming with Akin. This is just like our starting series with Akin, and I'm sure that again, whenever you have time, we will continue this series in future. And thanks a lot for your time today, Akin.
Thank you so much, Sunan, for having me around. Most sincere appreciations to you guys at Career Talk. Your resources have been helpful to not just me, but a lot of guys that I know out there in the industry, yourself and many other people there. Sometimes my advice to people out there is you need to cultivate this growth mindset. The agile industry or the project management industry is so wide. You cannot survive it if you just stop learning.
Absolutely.
Even if you think you know it, I think I have a habit right now. Every day I spend 30 minutes of my time on YouTube to just see something about agile. So
Absolutely.
that's my advice to you out there. And if you are in any industry right now, you want to transition, what have you, the resources are out there. I mean, I cannot estimate the enormity of the resources that you have on YouTube, particularly on Career Stock. If you are going for interviews, certain organizations, what have you, please, I recommend these guys. Just subscribe, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications. You will probably have answers to even those interview questions if you take your time to do these things. I did them and they worked perfectly for me. And I believe that if you repeat this methodology as well, in a short while, you will share your testimony. Thank you so much again, Sunan, for having me.
Thanks.
At
Thanks
any
a lot.
point in time, at any point in time you feel you need me, please, I'm just a message away from you. I'll be more than happy to give back to the society. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Akin. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, bye. Yeah.
Bye.